If you've ever been to Manhattan, you've probably seen Bellevue Hospital without knowing it. It's that massive, shadowy building on First Avenue that seems to absorb sunlight, even on the brightest day. What most people don't know is that Bellevue isn't just the oldest public hospital in the United States. It's also the place where some things simply should never have happened. My name is Chen, and I was a psychiatry resident at Bellevue because after what happened that October night, I could never set foot in that place again. And if you knew what I saw in the forgotten corridors of the basement, you'd never sleep peacefully again either. The story. It was my third week of night shifts on the 14th floor, in the psychiatric ward. Anyone who's ever worked at Bellevue knows the hospital has a different energy. It's not just the fact that it's been operating since 1736, or that it's been the scene of thousands of deaths over the centuries. It's something more visceral, something you feel in your skin when you walk alone through the corridors during the early morning hours. That specific night was October 13th, yes, a Friday the 13th, and I was covering 2 floors because another resident had called in sick. Around 2:30 in the morning, I was checking on patients when I heard something that chilled me to the bone. The sound of music. It wasn't the kind of music you'd expect to hear in a hospital. It was an old waltz, played on an out piano, coming from somewhere very distant. The sound echoed through the corridors as if it were being transmitted through the building's very walls. I asked the nurse at reception if she was hearing it too. She looked at me like I was crazy. "What music, doctor? I don't hear anything." But I could hear it. And I didn't just hear it. I felt like the music was calling me, pulling me toward a part of the hospital I had never visited. Following the sound, I went down the service stairs until I reached the basement. Bellevue is a labyrinth. Over 200 years of expansions, renovations, and modifications have created a network of underground corridors that not even the oldest employees know completely. The music was getting louder, and now I could hear something else. Voices. Dozens of voices whispering in unison, as if they were part of some ghostly choir. I came to a heavy metal door I had never seen before. It had a rusted sign that read "Closed wards, restricted access, 1924. The music was coming from inside. My hand was trembling when I turned the handle. The door opened with a loud creak that echoed through the empty corridor. What I saw on the other side of that door will haunt me for the rest of my life. It was a complete hospital ward, but from a much older era. The walls were covered with cracked, white tiles, and the smell of ether and old disinfectant permeated the air. But that wasn't what disturbed me. It was the fact that the ward was functioning. Nurses wearing 1920s uniforms walked through the corridors carrying trays of surgical instruments. Doctors in white coats were taking notes on clipboards using fountain pens, and in the rooms there were patients who clearly didn't belong to the 21st century. Some were tied to iron beds with leather straps. Others wandered the corridors wearing hospital gowns that looked like they had been washed 1,000 times. But they all had one thing in common: their eyes. Empty, lifeless eyes, like windows to absolute nothingness. And then I realized where the music was coming from. At the end of the corridor, in a common room, there was an old upright piano, and playing was a woman in a Victorian dress stained with blood. Her fingers moved over the keys with hypnotizing grace, but when she turned her head in my direction, I saw that half of her face had been surgically removed. She smiled with the side that remained of her mouth and whispered, "Welcome back, Dr. Chen. We've been waiting for you." That's when I realized the terrible truth. Those weren't visions or hallucinations. That ward had never been closed. It continued operating, decade after decade, with the same patients and staff, trapped in an eternal loop of medical procedures that should have ended almost a century ago. And the worst part, there was an empty bed at the end of the corridor, a bed with a nameplate on the headboard that read Dr. Sarah Chen, admission, October 13th, 2023. I ran like I had never run in my life, up the stairs, through corridors, until I reached the 14th floor again. When I looked back, the basement door had disappeared. It was just a solid wall, as if there had never been an entrance there. Impactful ending. I resigned the next day. I said I was changing specialties, that psychiatry wasn't for me. But the truth is, I knew that if I stayed one more day in that place, I would end up going down those stairs again. And this time I wouldn't have the strength to come back. 3 months later, I received a letter at my new job. It was from Bellevue Hospital. It said only, "Your bed is still waiting." The music never stops. And you know what the worst part of this whole story is? Sometimes, during the early morning hours, when everything is silent, I can still hear that waltz playing, distant, but always present, as if that woman in the blood-stained dress is still down there, playing piano for an audience of the living dead, patiently waiting for the day when I finally return to occupy my bed. If you ever need to go to Bellevue Hospital, avoid the basements, avoid listening to music that shouldn't be there, and especially, never, ever open doors that should have remained closed forever. Because some things at Bellevue Hospital never really die. They just, wait.